right, welcome everyone. Welcome to another Apt Wealth Partners event. Today we're talking about retirement. Stop thinking and start planning. Welcome to existing clients of Apt Wealth. You will have heard this before, but you're welcome to listen in again, hopefully pick up something new, and welcome to new members of the Apt Wealth family. Now, I'm Andrew Dunbar, CEO of Apt Wealth Partners, and I've been helping people plan and live their best retirement for over 20 years together with my team. And we've helped thousands of people through this retirement journey. And so you see a lot of different experiences, a lot of different stories around the successes and the mistakes that people make going into and through retirement. So I'm looking forward to sharing a bit of a framework with you today on how to make that a successful journey. And it's a topic that I really love talking about. Just a quick bit of housekeeping today. The Q&A box in your Zoom menu, just feel free to pop a question in that anytime throughout the presentation today, and we'll get to as many of those questions as we can at the end. The session is recorded today, so you'll get a copy of that after the event. And we're going to run a couple of polls throughout the session today. Now, they're totally anonymous. No one can see who's answering those polls, but it does help give me a sense of the room. So I'd encourage you to please fill those in and we can talk about those off the back of that. A quick disclaimer before we start, the information today is general in nature. It doesn't take into account your personal circumstances, and you should always seek personal advice. All right, so we're here to talk about retirement, and retirement is a topic that we love to talk about at Apt Wealth. We love planning for it with clients, and then we love seeing it come off and living that journey with them through retirement. And as I said at the beginning, we've helped thousands of families through this journey, and you obviously learn a lot through that. Now, I'm an old school guy, and so I did the old school thing and looked up the dictionary for the meaning of retirement. And this is what it said: the act of leaving your job and stopping work, usually because you are old. Wow. So I don't know about you, but I think we need to challenge that definition of retirement. That is not what modern retirement is. And life has changed a lot over the years. The current statistics say that a 65-year-old couple, they've got a 50% chance of one of them still being here in their late 90s. Now, in our late 90s, we might not be doing jumping jacks and flying around the world, but we could be doing that in our 80s these days, and that is a lot of life to live. So we need to try and get this right. And this is our favourite quote for retirement, and that is, at your end, you'll regret the things you didn't do instead of the things that you did. And retirement is a time that everyone looks forward to. But I think we really need to reimagine this retirement stage. Life used to be pretty straightforward. You'd study, then you'd work for a period of time, and then you'd retire for a few years, and then you'd die. But now life has changed, and medical technology has extended life expectancies, and the cycle of life is much more multifaceted than it used to be. People study, they work for a bit, they go back and study, they might have a break, they might work for a bit, study again even later in life, and then they can continue doing part-time work, whether paid or voluntary, while still living life to the full in their prime years, right through to their 70s or 80s. So I think, it really is now a time of new beginnings, new successes, new experiences, and really creating that legacy. And we'll talk a lot today about living the life that you really wanted to live. And if you think about teenagers, kids, they're trying to live up to the expectations of their parents all the time. Throughout that middle period in your life, often you're trying to keep up with the Joneses and live up to others' expectations around you. We don't want to be doing that in retirement. Now is the time when we want the freedom to be able to live life the way that we want to. And really, the key to that is preparation and planning, because being mentally prepared, financially prepared is what gives us the freedom to do that. And unfortunately, in general, it's not a time that's well planned for. And this means that many people don't end up living the ultimate retirement lifestyle that they should have. So, with that in mind, just a quick look at the agenda. We're going to have a look at the financial side. We're going to have a talk about how much you need to retire. We'll talk about what retirement looks like individually to you. We'll talk about investments, superannuation, estate planning, and then I want to spend some time talking about the transition into retirement and really that lifestyle adjustment. So we'll leave some time for that and questions at the end. Okay, now this is a stat that just fascinates me, and that is that 1 in 5 Australians think about retirement daily or often. Uh, Incredible, really, when you think about it. But we do understand because we see these people, we're dealing with them every day. And there is a lot of change. There's a lot to think about. So these questions, how much will I need? Will I run out of money? What's my lifestyle going to look like? They're things that people are thinking about. And if that's you, don't worry, that's perfectly normal. What happens with most of us is we go through our life, we are worrying about these things. And so we try to make some decisions, and they're basically educated guesses. And we just hope that things are going to work out. We're going to get where we wanted to get to, and we're going to be able to live this life that we've been desiring. But hope is not a strategy. It's only with proper planning that we can really alleviate this anxiety, free ourselves up, and be able to get on and live that life. And there's some fascinating studies recently about people who check their superannuation balances. And those who are going through their working lives, building up their superannuation, tend only to check their superannuation balance maybe once a year when they get their annual statement, or at best, maybe once a quarter. Whereas once we're in that retirement phase, the stats show most people are checking it every day and even multiple times a day. Now, why on earth would we check our superannuation balance multiple times a day? Crazy. But I think it comes back to this worry, not being properly planned, not having that confidence that we can do all the things that we want to do. So we're just constantly worried about it. What if the market crashes? What if I want to lend the money some kids? What if I want to take another holiday? All these sorts of things are just constantly on our mind. So what I want to do is just have a look at the official studies that are put together each year on how much we need to retire. And I'd like to ask the room via a poll how much you think you need to retire comfortably. Is it 300,000, 500,000, 750,000, or $1 million? So I'm just going to put this poll quickly up on the screen. I'd appreciate getting your feedback quickly, and then we can have a look at the results. Just give you a second to fill this out. I can see lots of responses coming in, so thanks very much for that. Well, I'm going to finish the poll now. And I'll share this on screen. This is a pretty typical set of results where we get a wide-ranging set of responses. You can see the majority of the answers so far are in the $1 million and more category, but we do have some at the $500,000 and some at the $750,000. So that's really interesting because what the official study from the Australian Bureau of Statistics and Association of Super Funds tells us is that the average couple for a comfortable retirement only needs $690,000 at age 65, and a single $595,000 to retire comfortably. Now, a comfortable retirement, they say, allows a good car, clothes, electronic equipment, eating out, regular domestic travel, and occasional overseas travel. So 30 years of retirement, who knows what could be possible with medical technology, but 690,000 for a couple. Could you live comfortably having that amount to start with? The answer, I think, is that it's different for everyone. Okay, it depends. And your number is going to be different from everyone else's number. And it really depends on the type of lifestyle that you want to live and how much you need to spend each year. For some people with very basic needs, that would be plenty of money. For most of the people that we see, that's not the type of lifestyle that they're aiming for, and they need more. Uh, but there's a whole range of things that will impact that. Will you totally cease work, or will you still work part time and bring in some income? What are you planning to do about your home? Are you going to stay there? Do you want to downsize? What about cars? Do you want one car, two cars? Do you want a luxury Mercedes, or are you happy with a Toyota Corolla? Travel, do you want to travel around Australia in your caravan, or does travel look like business class flights all around the world every year? And the kippers, of course, which is kids in parents' pockets eroding retirement savings. So, what does that look like? Family help that's becoming a bigger part of people's retirement and looks different for everyone. So, all these factors will determine what you're going to need to support the lifestyle that you want, and ultimately how much money you're going to need to be able to do that. These are those official figures from the Bureau of Statistics. So, for a comfortable retirement, they're saying a couple needs $75,000 a year, a single $53,000 a year. And for a very basic, modest lifestyle, a couple is about $50,000 a year, a single is about $34,500 a year. Now, those amounts there, coincidentally, are about the amount of the age pension. So that would cover a very modest lifestyle, but of course, many of us are aiming for that comfortable lifestyle or even beyond. Okay, so that's really the first step is starting to think about what sort of lifestyle do we want to live, um, how much money do we need to fund that. Now, when we're seeing clients, we generally see two types of retired clients, and this is really interesting because represented in blue here, a client will start off with an amount of money when they retire, and that money will be invested. Okay, and it will produce an amount of income each year, and it will go up and down the balance each year as well. Now, for these people, the amount of income that that money is producing is enough for them to do all of those things that they want to do to live the lifestyle thereafter. And the conversations with those people when they come in to see you, they're very relaxed and happy. Oh, let us tell you about our latest overseas trip. Here's what our kids and grandkids are doing. We want to help out these not-for-profit organisations. They're at ease with their money. They're not losing sleep over it. They're not checking their balance 3 times a day. They're getting on, living their life with purpose and doing the things that they want to do. And the second type of client starts out and they have an amount of money. Now, it could be more, it could be less, it could be the same as the first type of person. But the amount of income that they're producing is not enough to fund all of those things in their ideal lifestyle. So, what they're having to do is use that income plus access a little bit of their capital every year to top that up and meet their lifestyle expenses. So, as a result of that, year to year is going to be different, but they're slowly going to see their balance going down over time because they're accessing that capital. Now, the conversations with those people, particularly when they're starting out on this journey, unlike the first person, they go more like this, oh, we'd really like to take an overseas trip. Do you think we could afford that? Our kids are going through this situation. We'd really like to be able to help them. Do you think that that would be possible? What's happening with our investments? How much income are they generating? You can tell that money is playing a lot more on their mind. They would be those people checking their balance all the time, and they just can't get on with life and enjoy themselves. Now, That's actually how the whole system was designed. You're meant to work your life, build up this money in superannuation or other forms, then retire and then spend it down over your lifetime. So there's nothing necessarily that you need to be worrying about in that situation, but it all comes back to that planning and that giving you the confidence that yes, that's going to be the situation. We're comfortable with that and we can get on with doing what we're doing. So it does take a little bit more work to achieve that mindset in the type 2, but it's certainly possible and a big part of us working with people. So when we are working together with people, obviously setting yourself up financially is very important. And so you're working through the steps to do that. You're working on maximising your superannuation. You're working on minimising your tax. You're working on accessing any government benefits that you might be able to. You're structuring your investments so that you can tolerate any market downturns. You're trying to make sure that that income is going to last a lifetime. So you're doing all of those things, but you're doing those things for one reason, which is to give you the peace of mind and confidence to be able to live a life that's true to you, the lifestyle that you want to live that's going to make you happy. So we'll have a look at these steps. We'll look at the financial side, and we'll also spend some time looking at the lifestyle side. So your money's going to come from some different sources. It could be the age pension. It's traditionally going to be largely superannuation. There could be some savings and there could be other investments as well. So let's have a look at some of these. Now, understanding your investments is really key. Knowing your number, how much you need, what you need to spend is really important. But it's setting your investments up properly that will really give you the confidence that you can achieve this. Because I can guarantee you that through retirement, you are going to see market downturns. You will see market crashes without a shadow of a doubt. And what this chart here shows is there's actually a market downturn every year. This is perfectly normal. And we're now, 15, 20 years since the global financial crisis. So, it's quite likely that we will get something again over the next few years, similar to that scenario. But of course, no one knows when, if these events are going to happen. So we need to take steps to set ourselves up to protect ourselves from these events when they do occur. So just to explain what we're looking at here, the grey bars show the share market return from the start of the year to the end of the year. What was the total return? Okay. So if you look at 2012, 13 there, because they're quite similar years, in both of those years, the annual return was 15% on the share market. Now, during the year, the red dots represent the biggest market fall during the year. So in both of those years, there was a 10% drop and then an 11% drop during the year. And you can see every year that this is a scenario that generally unfolds where you get a reasonable positive return in most years. But during the year at different times, you are going to get negative periods. So setting yourself up is the key so that you can handle these and still have that peace of mind and confidence. And there's really one mistake we see people make, one principle that's fundamental to helping you achieve this. And this is your investment setup, traditionally through your superannuation fund, but also whatever other vehicle you're invested via. What we're looking at here is two different approaches. In the middle is a fund approach where there's thousands of investors in this particular fund. The fund owns some Australian shares, some international shares, some property, some cash, some fixed interest, etc. Thousands of investors are invested across all of that, and they just own units in that fund. Okay. So, for an example, you might have 1 million units invested in this fund. Each unit is worth $1. So that's your $1 million. Now, as all those investments move around, that $1 unit price is going to move up and down, and that will impact your total balance. And when you're putting money in, you're buying new units. When you're taking money out in retirement, you're selling or units. Okay, now contrast that to the outside the pie chart portfolio. This is where you own very similar investments. You own some Australian shares, international shares, property, cash, etc. But this time, you own your own investments. You can see exactly what you own. You know exactly what you own. What you own. So one, that gives you a lot more peace of mind because you can actually see it and understand it. You know that if Commonwealth Bank shares drop by 50% in the global financial crisis like they did, well, you're not panicking as much as if you just see your balance drop by 50% and you don't know what's going on. You know it's Commonwealth Bank. You know they're going to be here for the long term. You know things will recover and they'll continue on. And the second element is that all of the interest and dividend that these investments produce all get paid into a cash account, and the cash account is where you take your money from. So you're not having to sell the units like in that first example. So that's an explanation. Let's have a look at how this works in practice because that really brings it to life. What we did was we modeled out the global financial crisis Mark II. So this is a scenario where the share market drops, falls by half, and then it recovers over 5 years. And we looked at the example of having very similar investments. All that's different is the structure. So Max has that first approach, the unitized fund that was in the middle, where he's in that fund with thousands of other investors and he's having to sell those units in retirement. Jane, she has her own direct investments with a cash account. So when the market drops, you know, both Max and Jane want to get $6,000 a month for their living expenses, and they spend that. So when the market drops, rather than Max selling 6,000 units at $1 each to get his $6,000, he now has to sell double his units, so 12,000 units every month to get $6,000. And so by the time the market recovers, he's sold down so many of his units in the fund that he just can't ever recover his money. And you can see at the end of that period, his balance has gone from $1 million down to 375,000. Jane, on the other hand, has the same investments, taking the same amount, but all her interest and dividends is going into cash, and she's only ever taking her $6,000 from cash. So that leaves her investments intact, the time for them to recover in value, and you can see at the end of that period, she has $838,000 in her fund, which is tracking exactly as she planned. So nothing different there other than the structure of their investments, but it's making a $450,000 difference to their balance in that time. So this is the number one mistake we see people make. And it's been a big part of how we've helped people structure their money in retirement. Let's talk about superannuation because it really is one of the last free lunches in Australia. So why is superannuation a good investment? Well, it reduces our income tax when we're contributing because our contributions go in at a lower tax rate. We'll have a look at that. The earnings are very tax effective. It's forced savings for retirement. I really like this one, particularly for young people, because a lot of younger people will say to me, I don't even think about superannuation. You know, that's tomorrow's problem. I'll worry about that when I'm older and retiring. But that's the wrong way to look at it. If you know you are setting yourself up for a comfortable retirement, that your superannuation is on track to deliver what it needs to for you to retire when you want, it's actually the enabler of life today. You can then do the things that you want to do more confidently and freely, knowing that tomorrow is going to be okay. It's a very effective estate planning tool. We'll have a look at that. And of course, once you reach retirement, it provides tax-free income, which is great. So let's look at contributing into super. There's two ways basically to get money into superannuation. One is called concessional contributions, which is basically before tax contributions. That'd be money your employer puts in on your behalf. It's money that you salary sacrifice through your employer or that you put in and claim a tax deduction for. And there's a limit currently of $30,000 per year through that format. The other type of contribution is non-concessional, which is after-tax money. This is money you just have in the bank, you've already paid tax on it, and you just want to put it into your superannuation. There's a limit there of $120,000 a year. However, you can do 3 years in one, so you could do $360,000 as an example, which would mean then you couldn't contribute for the next 2 years after that. And these contribution limits will hopefully be indexed on the 1st of July this year. So that's the two formats. Thinking about concessional contributions, this is the advantage. Now, currently, there's not really any advantage if you're earning under $45,000 a year. There's a disadvantage if you're below the tax-free threshold of 18,200, although there is an offset now that the government will refund back to you to try and put you in the same position. So basically, this really becomes effective above $45,000 a year of earnings, and you can see the different tax rates there. If we take the 39% tax rate, which is between 135 and 190,000. If you took $1 of salary into your bank account, you would pay 39 cents in the dollar as tax. If you put that money into super instead, you only pay 15 cents in the dollar. So there's a 24 cent in the dollar advantage. So it is very effective contributing to superannuation before tax. And then the other side of tax is the earnings, okay? And there's two phases of superannuation. The first phase is accumulation, where you're working, you're building, you're contributing to super, building that up for retirement. Everything that it earns in that phase is taxed at 15%. Now, that's still very attractive compared to what your marginal tax rate is likely to be outside of superannuation. So it's very tax effective in that phase, but it's really powerful in the pension phase. The pension phase is once you've retired and you're then drawing down on your superannuation. And that's when there's no tax on the earnings and no tax on the income that you take out of superannuation. Now, because of that tax advantage, the government sets a minimum amount that you must withdraw from superannuation, which increases as you get older, as you can see there, because they don't want people just freely building up millions and millions of dollars in superannuation tax-free, which is not really a fair system. So it's really important that once you are eligible, once you retire, convert your superannuation from accumulation to pension phase to get that extra tax advantage. Now, putting money into superannuation through the concessional or before tax contributions, there's a new rule been around the last few years, which has been very effective for a lot of people, particularly, for example, working mums who've had time out of the workforce during their career and their superannuation is not what it otherwise would have been. Can be very effective where people have a high taxable income in 1 year before retirement. They might have sold a property or a business or an investment, things like that. So if your superannuation balance is under 500,000, you can take advantage of what they call the catch-up concessional contribution rule. And that is effectively bringing forward unused contributions from the previous 5 years to this year. So just as an example here, if we look at this graph in financial year 21, the cap on contributions that year was 25,000. Let's say someone made a $15,000 contribution in that year. They would have had $10,000 that's unused. That 10,000 could have been carried forward to the next year, financial year 22. The cap was ordinarily 27,500, but they've brought forward that $10,000. So now they could make up to $37,500 contribution. So on and so forth, up to financial year 25 there, where ordinarily the cap would have been $30,000, but they've had a big income year, sold a property or something like that, or they're about to retire and they just want to top up their superannuation balance tax effectively. You can see there they could make $107,500 contribution to super at that lower tax rate of 15%. So very powerful if it can be taken advantage of. And you really want to take advantage of every opportunity. If you found it lying on the street, you'd pick it up. So, government co-contribution, they will match your contribution up to 50% if you put in $1,000, up to $1,000. They'll then put it in up to $500 if you earn less than $62,000 a year. So that's very effective to do in the last few years before retirement if you're kind of transitioning to retirement and have a lower income. The spouse tax offset's also very useful if you've got a partner who maybe is not working or working part-time, earning a lower amount under $40,000. You can put in up to $3,000 for them and you'll get a tax offset on your tax as well. So little things that do add up over time. Now, something we're seeing a lot of in recent times is the downsizer contribution. This is where you sell your principal residence after reaching age 55, and you can make up to $300,000 contribution to superannuation. Now, this is per person. So in a couple, both members of the couple could make a $300,000 contribution, which would mean $600,000 going into superannuation. And it doesn't count towards their caps, which is fantastic. So it's a really good way to get some extra money into that tax-free environment before retiring or whilst retired. Okay, I want to talk a bit about estate planning. Again, I could see a couple of questions coming in. If you've got any questions, please put those in the Q&A box and I'll try and get to those at the end. So in Australia, we don't have death tax, right? That's what most people think. But really, we do have a stealth death tax, which is our superannuation beneficiary tax. So the first thing to understand is that superannuation is not an estate asset automatically. It doesn't just go through to your estate and be distributed according to your will. It's separate to that, and you need to have a binding death benefit nomination in place. Now, that nomination will bind the superannuation fund to pay it where you've told them to. Okay, so that's really important to make sure that you've got that in place. Otherwise, you're basically leaving it up to the super fund to make a decision on where that money should be paid. So make sure you've got that in place. Now, the second part is tax. So when superannuation passes to a dependent beneficiary, which would be a spouse or minor children, there's no tax on that transfer. However, when it's paid to non-dependents, which is usually adult children, most often the case with superannuation benefits, there is actually tax of up to 17%. Now, it won't be necessarily that full 17%. There's some that's taxable, some that's not, but it can be up to 17%. So that can be a lot of money. Like if it's $1 million, that could be $170,000 paid in tax. So what can we do to try and reduce that? Luckily, there often is things we can do to reduce it. And it's really something that you should talk about, think about, and plan for. A recontribution strategy is one of the popular things to do to eliminate this, where you basically take the money out of super, put it back in, it goes back in as tax-free money, and then there's no tax to those beneficiaries. It's a concept that's a little bit hard to get your head around at first. So let's have a look at an example of this. We've got Tom and Jane, who are 63. They've just retired. Jane has $720,000. She's transferred over to the pension phase of superannuation, which is good. But that was all put in by her employer over the years. She hasn't made any extra contributions herself. Tom, he has no super. He was self-employed, never put a dollar into super, so he's got nothing. So once Jane and Tom pass away, Jane's kids would be left to pay 17% on any of those remaining funds in super, which on $720,000 would be $122,400. So that's a fair whack to the kids. So if Jane, at 63, she's met a condition of release, she's above age 60 and she's retired, she can withdraw that whole $720,000 tax-free. Now, because they're both under age 75, remember back to our non-concessional contributions, they can each bring forward 3 years' worth into one, so they could each put $360,000 back into superannuation, and it goes in as tax-free money now, not taxable. And what that means is there's zero tax to any beneficiaries. So the adult kids would now receive that full $720,000. Now, not everyone can do a recontribution strategy, but where you can, and this applies, most of the time it will make sense to do so. Just want to touch on some legislation at the moment that we're waiting to be finalised. It's in front of Parliament at the moment. It's got a lot of media, called Division 296 Superannuation Tax. This was for a long time being coined the $3 million cap on superannuation. Not that it was necessarily that, but it's basically an additional tax rate for balances above $3 million. And the current proposal is that between $3 and $10 million as an individual's balance, instead of paying 15% tax on earnings, 30% would apply. And above $10 million, instead of 15% tax, 40% would apply. So we'll wait and see exactly where that legislation lands. We don't need to take any action just yet. There are absolutely things we can do. And behind the scenes, we've been working for 12 or 18 months on strategies that we can put in place to reduce this. Some of those things we could do now, like, for example, in a couple, equalising the superannuation balances. We might be able to take some money from one, contribute it to the other superannuation balance, and be under or close to that $3 million limit. That's a simple one that you could start enacting now. But above that, things like taking money out of super and putting them into alternate structures or investments, that kind of thing doesn't need to occur yet. And we want to wait and see what the final legislation is before we make any dramatic moves such as that. So again, if you've got any questions on this, you can put them in the chat or forward them through to us afterwards. Now, I want to spend just a little bit of time on talking about transitioning to retirement. We've talked about a bit of a framework in terms of the financials and the investment setup in retirement, which is really important in terms of being prepared financially to give you that confidence and peace of mind. But this is the bit that people most often get wrong. And this is really, we'll look at a study in a minute, but this is really what leads to people regretting their retirement years, is not being prepared, not putting thought into the lifestyle transition into retirement. So when you retire, you've really got to think about what you're going to do, what you want to try and achieve in those retirement years. You can't play golf every day of the year. And so you've got to go into that with purpose around thinking what you're going to do. And the most important portfolio to consider in retirement is not your investment portfolio. It's the portfolio of activities, hobbies, social interactions, healthy interactions that you're going to make during your retirement years. And it takes a lot of thought to get that right. Because when we leave work, we actually give up a lot of things, and sometimes they're not always clear on the surface. I mean, yes, obviously it's a daily activity that you're doing. The social connection, though, is huge. We're social beings, and we need that social connection. And often our place of employment is a big source of that. So, how are we going to replace those social connections in retirement? We get a real sense of accomplishment, a purpose, a satisfaction, a direction from our employment. And many of you will be lucky enough, like me, to love what you do for your employment, which is fantastic. But if that's going to cease, what's going to give us that sense of purpose and direction? Routine and structure is massive. And yeah, almost without fail, we find the first few months of retirement people really struggle with because they had a routine around their employment, a time of the day to get up, a time to maybe do some exercise, time to have breakfast and coffee, get into the workplace, time to come home. It really drives how we live our days. When we lose that routine in retirement, that can be a very difficult thing to deal with. And we see a lot of mental struggles with that, particularly over that first few months until people find their routine. So one of the best things that you can do is a transition from work into retirement where you might work part-time 2 days a week or something, and you still got a bit of that routine, but you can start to build these other activities and form a new routine outside of work. It does make that adjustment easier. We also get a sense of status from the workplace as well, and mentoring others, helping other people. How can we continue that throughout our retirement years? This is my favourite study, which is uh, Bronnie Ware, who was an Australian palliative care nurse. She had the opportunity to be at the bedside of dying patients, and she interviewed them before they passed away and asked them what their regrets in life were. And this is fascinating. These were the top 5 regrets. I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. I wish I hadn't worked so hard. I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. I wish that I'd let myself be happier. I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. So, we're talking earlier about living up to others' expectations. It is not your role in life to live up to the expectation of others. Your only role in life is to be who you want to be. And it's very likely that, as I said, you spent those early years living up to the expectations of your parents, you spend your middle years living up to the expectations of all those around you. Well, that's fine. But now we've got a real opportunity. This is going to be a significant part of our life in retirement, to do what we want to do, live life how we want to live, and be happy. I had a call a couple of months ago from a long-term client of mine that I'd worked with for 20 odd years. She was in her late 90s and she knew that her time was coming to an end. And she called me to say how grateful she was for sharing that part of her life with me and how much purpose, satisfaction, family satisfaction she got out of those years in retirement because of the work that we'd done for me. And something that I think I'll never forget, until I go to the grave, that getting that phone call, because that is centered all around this. And I think if we can achieve one thing in retirement, living a life true to ourselves, being happy, that's what it's all about. All right, now. Uh, for our existing clients, you've worked with us over a long period of time, and hopefully, no doubt, seen the benefit of that experience and helping you make the most of this retirement phase. And for those that don't, you can go it alone, or you can choose a partner, and whether it's Apt or it's someone else, it's someone that you trust, someone that has the experience dealing with this, that can share the stories, share the mistakes, share the successes with you. And as I said, we've helped over 3,000 families through this journey, and we now help them help manage over $3 billion of their funds through this phase as well. And retirement is something that we love planning for, love living with our clients. So, we'd love to help you on that journey. This is basically, how our retirement service runs. So yes, it is about understanding your investments and the importance of getting that right. It is about maximizing the income through retirement, maximizing your benefits, surviving the market downturns that occur. But it's also about helping you make this lifestyle, emotional, and financial transition into retirement to ultimately live the lifestyle that you're after. Maximizing wealth is not an end goal for retirement because there's no end in sight for that goal. There's no purpose in it. We want to have a purposeful retirement, clearly know what we're trying to achieve, how we want to live our life in retirement, and set up our finances to plan and execute that. All right, that brings us to the end of today's session. So, got a bit of time to just work through a couple of questions. Bring up the Q&A box. Does a comfortable retirement assume a zero mortgage? That's a great question, and yes, it does assume a zero mortgage. And more we're seeing people enter retire with still something left on the mortgage. So that all has to come into forming that number. How are we going to pay off the mortgage and still have money to live comfortably? Does the Division 296 tax apply to the total amount across combined pension and accumulation funds or just on the amount in the accumulation fund? That's a great question as well. And it does apply to your total balance across all superannuation. Okay. Let's have another look here. Does a recontribution strategy make sense for all? Well, no, it does depend. It doesn't necessarily make sense for everyone, but for most people, it will. Do I need a self-managed super fund to hold those direct investments? That's a good question. No, you don't. You can have a self-managed super fund and hold your own investments, and lots of our clients prefer to do that and have total control. But these days, many, if not most, superannuation funds will let you have control of those investments and own your own investments. So it's just about working with someone to figure out what that looks like for you. How can I eliminate the beneficiary tax as a person with $1 million in superannuation? Yeah, good question. So we looked at an example where it was, sat perfectly on the numbers with the $360,000 contribution. When you've got $1 million, you can't eliminate it all in one. You would have to do it in stages. You could take out 360,000, contribute it into super, wait the 2 years, then you could do it again and maximize your contribution limit. Then, so potentially maybe 3 times of doing that, you might be able to eliminate the tax on the full $1 million. There's one more question. I've got shares in my superannuation fund, but I don't think I own my own shares. Is it actually possible to own your own shares? Yes, you can own your own shares in superannuation and have them directly rather than just as part of a fund and owning units in that allocation like we looked at. All right. Looks like that might be all for our questions today. So thanks very much for your engagement. Thanks for attending today. Hopefully you've got something out of that. If you've got any questions as a follow-up, please reach out to your advisor or please give us a call and have a chat. We'd be happy to do that. Look out for our upcoming events. We've got 2 or 3 a month over the next few months on different topics. So it'd be great to see you again. Otherwise, have a great day. Thank you.